Okay, I guess we are live again. So welcome back, everyone. I see a good, strong audience even now. With pleasure, I would like to introduce you to my colleague Shalini Gupta. She is heading our strategy department and comes with immense and rich experience across 2 decades in strategy, growth, impact with multinational companies, and also as an entrepreneur herself. She has updates for us on the legal foundational services, and I will now give it on to her. Carry on,
Yeah,
Shal.
thanks, Ruchi. Thanks for the kind introduction. And in fact, special thanks to Pramod, to kind of explaining the case for legal foundational services. And a lot of explanation has already come from there. So that should make my work a little easier. So I'm just kind of presenting an update on what went behind the whole concept of legal foundation services as we kind of worked on it with Sahamati. So just give me a second. I'll put on a presentation. I'm sorry. Just a second. Yeah. So is my screen visible? It is. Yeah. Yeah. So here, what I'll do is we will just take you through the journey of, the legal foundational services as it, happened behind the doors, what went into the planning and why we created it. So I'll just quickly jump to the agenda. So why ecosystem participation terms from IYA? So, this is the agenda. Today we'll talk about the why, what, how of, what went behind designing the ecosystem participation terms. What was the spirit behind it, why we thought it's useful and how it should be implemented. And finally, in the last leg, we will also talk about, what is the role we envisage as Sahamati for this ecosystem. So here is the why of, why do we need a ecosystem participation terms. In fact, a lot of these points have already been, taken up by Pramod in the keynote session, and they, explained. But from Sahamati, when we thought of it, we saw, 5 key reasons on why these ecosystem participation terms are a must. The first being, it's a unique ecosystem. For every transaction involved, there are 4 parties. There is a FIP, AA, FIU, and there is a customer. Yeah. And each of these 3 entities, the financial institutions are actually bound to the customer through their own sets of terms and conditions, right? So the customer is a FIU customer, he is a FIP customer, and there is a AA customer. So all of them have overlapping, obligations, which can sometimes be, common, and sometimes it can be in contradiction with each other. And the system is pretty unique because, every transaction is happening on a real time. So the data is flowing in real time through the AA from the FIP to the FIU. So that makes it very unique, and we need to have some common standards where we can bind all these parties together. The second, which we feel is very important, is, the system is designed to be completely interoperable, operate like, let's say, the example of UPI handle, wherein if a customer has created a AA handle on any platform, he or she should have the ability to use the same handle to give a consent to share his data on any journey, right? So which necessarily means that, all FIPs will need to be connected to all AAs, and all FIUs, to ensure that the journey doesn't get broken and the customer gets a seamless experience, will have to connect to a AA. Now let's talk, if we look at this in some numbers, if there are, let's say, more around thousands of entities, like, if you're talking of all financial sector regulatory entities participating in the system, that would run in thousands. And even if you're talking of 20 AAs in the end state, I mean, that could actually mean lakhs of bilateral agreements that will need to be signed to. So that I feel, this ecosystem, we need to understand that this is designed in a manner which is very different from any other ecosystem. Even a credit bureau, I mean, that's still a simpler, system to manage. This is something which is much more complex. So for this, you need to have a strategy which is different, and that is where we feel ecosystem participation terms will play a big role in, making it truly interoperable. The third aspect, again, it is very unique to the sector, is that, it is in under the sphere of multiple regulators. So all of them are regulators, and they have put in guidelines for their participants. But we are talking of a unique scenario where, every so out of the three entities, every entity could be actually belonging to a different financial sector regulator. So there could be an insurance company as the FIP, there is a AA which is under RBI, and there is a FIU which could be under securities. So you are actually looking at three entities from three different sectors, and each have, agreed to follow a certain set of customer standards and, terms and conditions. So that makes it very complex, and you're talking of a single transaction, right? So you could not be having multiple, terms and conditions for each of the participant there. And to add to the complexity, we're looking for taking this even further. So right now we're just at the financial sector regulators. Tomorrow, let's say, we are talking of GST coming in, then it can be income tax, and later on, let's say, if there is value, it may actually go to some telecom companies, tri regulated companies. So we are just talking of a dynamic sector which can, become complex by the day. So that takes us to the fourth point, which is standard rules, which I think, just flows from the first three. And the last thing is really important, because we are talking of an ecosystem which is highly technology driven, and it is based on a data governance principle. Data governance will also change with changing technology, right? The definitions will change, and as more and more entities from different sectors enter, there would be need for common definitions to come in a, a framework which is truly dynamic. And if for a truly dynamic framework, you need to have a dynamic, participation terms, right? Because they have to evolve with the way the ecosystem is evolving. They cannot be left behind. And if we leave it, to bilateral agreements, I mean, you would know that, it's not almost impossible to go back and change the bilateral agreements. There is a lot of information asymmetry, big players versus small players, lack of understanding. So, somewhere there is a need for this common good to be in place if we are, truly committed to building a ecosystem which is interoperable, dynamic, and efficient. So this is what we think about the why. The next we have is, what ecosystem participation terms are and are not. The reason we have put this slide is that in a lot of our discussions with you, when we came, discussing this concept with you, there was, there were a lot of questions about, what they are and what they are not. So we thought, let's upfront agree to a common definition of what we are trying to, solve by having ecosystem participation terms. So in ecosystem participation terms are multilateral, being multi-party. They are multilateral agreements under a master contractual framework where each participant, including the AA, FIU, FIP, and customer, on signing it, gets into a contract with every other participant immediately and simultaneously. So, today, so tomorrow, let's say there is a FIU who wants to enter the ecosystem. He just signs this multilateral agreement, digitally signs it, and unilaterally executes it. And instantly he is connected to everyone in the ecosystem, right? And that is what we need with this ecosystem to be interoperable and truly efficient. The terms have been built, keeping in mind all regulatory guidelines that are relevant for the ecosystem. They take into account the RIBIT technical specification, RBI master guidelines for AA, any other certification norms. So they are, they just ensure that everyone is aligned to what the regulator wants us to be aligned to. Lastly, they are all encompassing. So what we have tried to done is anything which is non-commercial, the non-commercial aspects of any agreement which are standard to any legal agreement of businesses, they have been covered into the agreement. And a lot of these clauses, as you would all agree, that are really time consuming and the most negotiated clauses. So what we have tried to do is include them all in the common terms, so that tomorrow, when we are building and growing this system, we're not worrying about how to onboard people with common participants with common terms and with no overlapping obligations, and which can later be a breeding ground for legal disputes and incur a lot of legal cost. So the way we what they are not, now this is again important. So these are not best practice code of conducts that you're signing. These are enforceable code of conducts which you are signing, and they are legally binding on all the participants who are signing it. They are parallel, they are not parallel guidelines by any regulator. So we're not trying to create any parallel framework or certification requirements which the regulator has not asked for. So they are totally aligned to the current regulatory framework and totally enforceable. They are not, you're not signing any outsourcing arrangement with Sahamati, because we get this question many times, and they are absolutely not for constituting Sahamati as an SRO. So what we are just doing is basically building a common good for the ecosystem, so that the system can just kickstart their business, the reason for which they were constituted, without getting into too much of legal work. Uh, Commercial terms are not included, because that we believe the participants are the best people to get into mutually negotiated commercial terms. However, what we intend to do is that by signing the agreement, it should eliminate the need for any of the clauses, the business clauses, to be included in the bilateral agreement. And the bilateral agreement will be limited only, should be ideally only a 2 or 3 pager commercial term agreement, which can be signed between the FIP, AA, and AA and FIO. So this is in nutshell what how we see these ecosystem participation terms. I'm sure there would be a lot of questions, and we can take them up in the next sessions in the panel discussion. Ask me anything. I'll quickly move on to the next slide. When we say that participation terms are all encompassing, what does it include? So like I said, it includes all clauses which will be form part of any regular contract which you get into with businesses. So it has a client interface and a customer onboarding process, obligation and responsibilities for each of the participants, all three entities including the customer, what is the process for data transfer, data governance, indemnification, liabilities. How do you manage the change? Like we said, it is a dynamic agreement. How do you deal with issues like exit, suspension, how termination, if let's say someone is not complying, then what are the next steps? Grievance redressal mechanism, what should that be, in case there are certain issues that have to be handled mutually, either between the participants or with the customers. So I mean, like you say, it's a complete range of clauses, and we just want that all that to become standard and uniform across the ecosystem. The next slide is like, we also want to kind of take you through about how these participation terms have been formed. So they have not been formed by, 1 or 2 people sitting in a room and just kind of building a draft. They are an outcome of ongoing consultations and feedbacks with from legal teams of participants, across the ecosystem. In fact, legal teams have been working with us, and there was a working group of account aggregators who also participated. And the current version, the participation terms version 1.0, is what is currently active, and it is an outcome of that first level of discussions which had happened extensively. And the current active participation terms have, that what is happening is then almost 40 people participants have signed to it. Another 73 are in the process of evaluating and signing it. And that gives a lot of confidence to us that what we took upon as a goal for the ecosystem is actually working in the right direction. In fact, I mean, we would want this to be a much larger number, but I suppose we need a lot more reach out to happen for that. The next step now, what is happening in parallel is, as participants are signing this, we are also getting feedback either from the ones who have signed it or who are in the process of signing it. There are, in being a legal document, and of course it is well accepted that there would be concerns and some areas where some feedback has to be plugged in, and gaps have to be plugged in, changes have to be made. So for that, what we have done is consultations and feedbacks are already underway. We are kind of consolidating all feedback in one place. We are also proposing to form a working group so that as we get a good set of feedback, I mean, we are just hoping that it should be substantial enough that it doesn't warrant a change again. So we are just hoping for a good amount of feedback to come in, which we are planning to incorporate, discuss, take it back to you, and once we get an go ahead, we then publish that. But here I would like to kind of clearly say that currently the participation terms version 1 is the active contract, and it is not a draft, it is an active contract which is legally binding, enforceable. So till the time we come out with the next version. And beyond that, like we said, given that this is a dynamic ecosystem thing, this will keep evolving, and with technology, data governance laws, basis the working group recommendations, basis if let's say there is another set of entity who joins the ecosystem. So all this is a continuous process, but one thing which is common and which we would like to ensure is that it is an outcome of a highly detailed consultative process, incorporating feedback from everyone in the ecosystem. So here is a list of the current participants who have already signed to the ecosystem participation terms, and like you can see, it's a good spread. So we've got banks, small commercial banks, small finance banks, we've got NBFCs, and we've got a good representation from the insurance and the security sector, and of course all our account aggregators are already signed in. So to that extent, I mean, I would say it's a very good start, and we just need to kind of see how we can increase the adoption, and explain, take the case to others who have not signed up. This slide is just intended to give a bird's eye view of what are the key areas of feedback which we have got on the participation terms. So there are two categories. One is where participants have come back and asked us to give them more clarity and more documents to support. So for example, the change management process, while we have laid out the way future versions of this document would be drafted, and how people participants would be notified, consulted, and there is a process where we have differentiated between the process for a smaller change versus a major change. But there is a request that we should actually draft it in more detail so that people are aligned on the process. So that is one part which we are already working on. Second in this line is request for from participants to build standard SLAs. Right now, what the industry, so because here SLA again is a very tricky subject. FIU and AA is bound to SLA, and the AA and FIP is bound to SLA. But broadly, the AA and FIU SLAs are dependent on the SLAs between the FIP and the AA also, right, to some extent. So they're all interconnected. So what we are doing is based on the way industry has evolved, like last 3 or 4 months, whatever feedback we have received in terms of uptime and other technological specification, we also propose to put all of that together in some SLAs, which will obviously again be in consultation with working groups, and we'll take it to you, all of you, and once approved, we will adopt them as something as a part of the agreement. Same goes for privacy policy. There are a few clauses, and these clauses we all understand are always tricky to navigate, where there are some clarifications which have been asked for. So we will definitely on this the consultative process is on, and we'll definitely incorporate all the feedback received and try to come out with a common set of clauses which can address everyone's concern. Now, I mean, quickly, we will just like to explain what we, see ourselves doing in this legal foundational services that we keep talking of. So one is facilitation, like, someone, as we just want to be the entity who can actually drive the drafting of participation terms, and more important, ensure that the process for drafting and adopting participation terms is fair and is done with wide stakeholders consultations. And that is the reason, we keep coming to you for your feedback, and that will continue to do. So this is one. Second is advocacy, right, for the adoptions, because like we said, and as Pramod also explained, we see this as a critical common digital common good that is required for a uniform and wide coverage of the AA ecosystem to make it interoperable and truly valuable to India. And third is the secretarial support. So we also see that, once, more and more participants sign up, there is a need to maintain repositories of signed copies, manage versions, run the change management process, identify the need, when do we trigger the next change management process, the consultation process. So all that is something which we feel that, there has to be a common entity who can do that, and we would like to take up that role. And the fourth is an online dispute resolution mechanism. Again, given the complexity of the ecosystem, like we spoke about, cross-sectoral, interoperable, multi-party, all that, obviously, as the system grows, there would be issues. I won't call them disputes all the time, but there would be issues which will require cross-participant redressal mechanism. So for that, we have in mind a online dispute resolution mechanism. I'll explain that in brief in the next slide, and that will be my last slide. Yeah. So here, again, Pramod has referred to this. So we are trying to see if there can be a multi-tiered approach to grievance redressal mechanism in this sector. So this system will run in parallel to any other regulatory mechanism which is there. So we are not saying that it is uh, I mean, it's just an addition to whatever channels the customer currently has, be it regulatory or going to their, financial institution for redressal. But what we feel is that there is a need to have a common, automated resolution mechanism, ADR mechanism, where almost 99 to 95% of the issues can be handled through technology, automation, lot of to and fro that happens between different participants, even the customers, can be handled by technology. Log files can be created, issues can be sorted, communication can be given on an automated basis. So that is something which we envisage as one of our key targets that we have set out for ourselves. Beyond issues, I mean, the idea is to say that we limit the disputes. We say that we handle everything at the issue level, and so be done with it. But there would be certain issues which require escalation. For that, we propose a online dispute resolution mechanism, ODR facility, where arbitration proceedings can be done through the ODR providers. So we are planning to impanel set of ODR providers who can then mediate and arbitrate between two kind of participants, or even a customer and a participant, and all that in a technology intensive manner, without any physical or manual work required. So that should actually address a big pain point which we envisage this ecosystem might actually go through if when it grows large. And as we have a parallel similar in the bureaus where a lot of issues like this come up, so we are just hoping that these two should address a big problem that can tomorrow come onto the ecosystem. So this is in nutshell on what we have in mind in the legal foundational services. And in fact, in the next session, we will hear about, we'll see from a panelist as to, we'll hear their views. So I'm just handing it back to Ruchi now.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you so much. That was quite extensive and good understanding for what lays ahead. I will not take too much time. We are running behind schedule. I'm sorry to give that news on a weekend, but I'm sure you would want to sit through the rest of the sessions. So I'll quickly start the other one. Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you.